and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, with the City of Hampton's Communications and Marketing Department. And today we're going to talk about a subject that is important to everybody out there, which is fire safety, how to prevent fires. I am told that 67% of home fires occur in the winter, so it's particularly timely. And my guest, Lieutenant Anthony Chittum, is going to tell us all about it. So welcome, Tony.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I hear you said your group was fighting fires, last night, the night before? What's going on out there?
Well, wintertime is historically, as you said, 67% of all fires.
Well, I learned that from you, and I take all the credit for knowing these facts.
67% of all all fires are historically in the wintertime. And of course, there's contributing factors to that. People tend to be home more in the wintertime, tend to stay in their home more. And as time goes with that, as they actually have it broken down into time frames, most winter fires are between 5 and 8 o'clock. Historically, is what the numbers are. So
people are home.
Right.
People are probably
they're cooking. And that's the other part, is that it tends to be cooking fires. Even though it's the winter, we tend to think of fireplaces and things like that, which are a contributor to those type of things. And we'll get into some of the maintenance issues and some of the things we need to look at as homeowners when you start talking about winter fire safety.
So it is a big variety. It's not, what comes to my head is heaters and space heaters. How big a part of the problem are those things?
Well, heaters and space heaters, the biggest thing, we have a rule for those. It's called 3 feet from the heat. And what we mean by that is anytime you have a space heater, which if you actually read the directions on a space heater or a...
Don't read directions anymore.
So, okay, if you were to read the directions on a space heater or a kerosene heater, what you would find is it actually says things like not to be used inside with a kerosene heater without being well ventilated. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of having that type of heater if you're going to open windows. And the reason for that is there's a couple of issues. You have carbon monoxide, which for our viewers out there who don't know, it's an odorless, colorless, tasteless gas that actually, when you don't have complete burning of all the fossil fuels, that it produces that. And so it's extremely deadly. We recommend for anyone with any type of propane, natural gas, oil heat, that they have carbon monoxide detectors in their home just for that.
Oil heat too? I guess that means I need to get one. I have one. It's not anywhere near the furnace though, so that's probably not as effective.
No, and you want it in the general vicinity. You don't necessarily want it next to it because you might get a false reading, but you do want it in the general vicinity. But when we start talking about space heaters and things like that, that 3 feet from the heat rule basically is saying, hey, anything that's combustible within 3 feet, we should move those things away. That way, if it's accidentally tipped over, if a curtain should brush up against it, it takes away the possibility of the curtain or anything brushing up against it.
Right.
A lot of the new heaters have safety features in them. If they're tipped over, they automatically cut off. But as we know, if you buy something before that was done and it still works, you're not going to discard it. So we just recommend, as a general rule of thumb, any heat source to keep anything combustible 3 feet away from it.
Okay. That's going to be a hard one for people, I think, because, you want to huddle around or you forget. You're just kind of used to using it. I'll bet also you want to turn it off when you're not physically present.
Absolutely. That's another rule. People don't think about that, but they go, oh, when I come back in. Well, those heaters are called space heaters for that reason. They're actually for the space that you're in. They're normally used just to take the chill out of a particular room that might not be as insulated as well, the windows, or it really wasn't, it was a converted garage, which a lot of us have done, converted garages and things, and so it doesn't have the forced air heat in that area, so they use those things.
Or frankly, when the weather got down to 11 degrees recently, a lot of people's heat pumps just don't keep up, so you might have needed a little boost.
Absolutely, that's a big issue, and another thing people don't think about is their pets. You want to be extremely careful when you have pets around those things. If you have a large breed dog, we all know they get excited, they have large tails. Well, not only the possibility of them knocking it over, but the other thing, the possibility of injury to your animal themselves.
Right. Okay. So that was the easy one, the one that leaps to mind. But you said there's a lot of other causes for winter fires. What else do we need to be aware of?
Well, we've just passed the Christmas season, so everyone historically thinks about live trees and not watering them properly, and the possibility of that. Well, on the same side, the things that you need to look at for winter fire safety are Candles, people don't think about it. The power tends to go out in the wintertime if you have, we're fairly lucky of not having large ice storms around here, but when it does happen,
Right.
since we don't get it very often, we're not as prepared as some of the other areas for that. So we talk about candle safety. You really want to make sure that candles are never left unattended, never left around children. And again, the same thing. You want to make sure that they are, again, 3 feet from any possible ignition source. Wintertime, we talk about, you were saying heating. Well, some people don't have the ability with the price of kerosene, the way it's gone up, and they would historically use kerosene heaters. Well, people will leave ovens open and trying to use that. We never recommend that.
Now, why? Let's talk about the reasons, because I think, I don't usually leave it when my oven's on, but boy, if I'm done baking cookies, I'm going to leave that door open just to let the heat out instead of sending it back up.
Right.
But I can see why people would think, okay, so the oven's on, what's that going to hurt?
Well, it's really for two things. One, it's not meant for that, and you hate to say it like that.
It's not very efficient. It's not
right.
a good use of your
It's
electricity.
actually very expensive to run. Now, one of your largest heating bills or one of your largest electric bills is using things that produce heat, such as your oven, such as your dryer, just strictly because they have a heating element that they're heating up. The danger of small children, ovens are extremely large. You talk about a child just literally, you hate to say, falling in or injuring themselves is very likely for that. As we talk about alternate sources of heat, fireplaces are one, wood stoves, things like that. Though they are great sources of heat, they require maintenance every year. And when we say every year, they should be inspected and cleaned by a chimney company, a licensed and insured chimney company to come in. And besides making sure they're clean, they also inspect for things like cracks in the flue. And what we mean by that is, as you have your chimney, as the mortar, and depending on the age of your home, the heat, it gets hot, it gets cold, it gets hot, it gets cold, it has the possibility of cracking. Well, you might not see that since it's 15 feet, 10 feet up into your home and on your roof line. Well, when that happens, a lot of times those cracks happen in an attic space. Well, we don't go in our attic every day and look at that.
Right.
So you have the possibility of fire being caused by that, or chimney fires.
And also, those of us in an older home, there was different construction standards for fireplaces, and that mortar just starts to crumble. We kind of had to have a whole lot of things replaced recently because the construction standards were different, and things don't last forever.
Absolutely. And what we tell everyone is if you do happen to have a chimney fire and doing that, everyone wonders, what do you do? What do you do? Well, the first thing you do is you dial 911.
Right.
That's
always
the
the
easiest
first.
thing. That's the first thing. Second thing you want to do is you just want to close, if you're able to, if it is you have a screen across it and you have dampers, you want to close the dampers, close any doors to try to keep the heat and the flames from coming out. You're trying to...
Because that air is going to keep that fire going.
You're trying to smother it. And our response time is under 5 minutes. Historically, it is actually less than that. And so by the time you dial 911, no matter what time of the day it is, by the time it's in the middle of the night, if something like that should occur, we will be at your house in under 5 minutes. And I realize that seems like a long time when you're having an emergency. But for national standards, we exceed the current national standards in under 5 minutes. So by the time you do those things, you dial 911, we will be there. The same thing, if you have that, we recommend that you get out of the home. It actually sounds, if you listen to someone who's ever had one, they said it'll sound almost like a train in your house, that it actually makes that much noise. If you happen to have a chimney fire, it is an extremely, for some people, dramatic, for the simple fact that it's something they're not used to. It sparks. They'll go out and they'll see flames shooting out of their chimney.
It's kind of cool, really.
Or a neighbor.
I had one once out in Montana.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a little scary, but it was cool.
Yes. So, again, dial 911 and
warn your neighbors. One of the things about chimney fires and flames shooting up is that those sparks can land other places.
Absolutely.
So you do want to warn the people
right,
around
and
you.
we're in a fairly dense urban population,
Right.
so the homes are fairly close. So yes, you do want to make sure you watch that. Let the neighbors know.
Okay, cooking. You're right. I cook a lot more in the winter. I need more soups, more warm foods than I do in the summer. So that causes some problems.
It does. Everyone thinks one of the causes, and not necessarily a fire, but fire safety, I think we're all guilty of that, are crock pots. Everyone believes crock pots, that you can start it in the morning and you can leave.
That's what they're for, right?
Well, again, it comes back to if you read the instructions, it says should never be left unattended. And
No way,
yes.
really?
So again, you don't want to tell anyone how they should do this, but people should be aware that when you start talking about something that heats something to hundreds of degrees, whether it's on low or high, some of those different things, that you're leaving your home. You ask somebody, would you boil water and leave it on your stove? And most people will tell you no. Well, with a lid on it and a crock pot, what's the difference between doing that? You're essentially doing the same thing. Stove fires, we talk about that. That's a maintenance issue as well. We want to make sure that you keep it clean, make sure at all times when you're done, if there's any type of grease, that you clean that up. If you should happen to have a grease fire, something like that should happen, the first thing you want to do, and we all know that what you should do, but when panic sets in, we do two different things. We never want to throw water on them.
Right.
If at all possible, everyone talks about baking soda. Well, I recommend that you have a fire extinguisher handy in the kitchen. And it shouldn't be next to the stove. It should be somewhere because if you have a large flame,
you don't want to get that close.
Right, the last thing you want to do is be able to do that. So should be an accessible place, easily accessible. In times of panic, you don't want to have to go, is it under a sink, is it here? Should it be mounted somewhere that's visible? It should be that you can see it and go from there. If you don't happen to have that, and they talk about baking soda, one of the best things that you can do is take a cake pan or a large metal baking dish and put that over the particular skillet. Everyone's worried about lids. Well, the problem with the lids is where do you hold it? You hold it at a handle, and then you set it down.
Right,
with a large baking sheet.
Or they've got silicone, or they've got some other,
Exactly. With a large baking sheet, you're able to take it and hold it on the end and slide it at an angle away from that over the pan to keep yourself from getting burned. At no time do you ever want to move that. Most burns and injuries occur, and more damage to the house itself is when they want to take that grease or that fire outside.
And move it.
And they move it. So what do you have? You have a flaming liquid that you run across your carpet to try to get it out your back door or your front door, and then you tend to do damage to the rest of your home that way.
Or yourself.
Or yourself,
It's very
exactly.
easy to spill that. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Anything else?
We would like to let you know at any time if you'd like to dial 727-1210. That's our fire prevention office. Some of the services we offer free home safety surveys. And what that is, we will actually come out to your home, and we have a checklist that we use, and we will look for possible fire and safety hazards. Everything from overloaded outlets. We don't correct any of these issues, but what we will do is educate the public, saying, hey, you shouldn't have a power strip attached to a power strip.
Oh, I bet you'd find some of those
We
in my
do.
house.
We do. If you don't have a smoke alarm, the city provides smoke alarms to our citizens. To ensure that you have one, we would rather be at the preventative side than the reactive side.
Well, it makes sense. What does a smoke detector cost? Like $4 versus
Yes.
one call from a fire station and damage to a home. That's a whole lot more money.
Right, and as we all know, with these tough financial times, whether you have insurance or not with a deductible, we would rather come out and supply that to you and try to prevent those things. And we look at other things. One of the last things is with this winter safety, we've had that cold spell. So far, we haven't had any snow or ice. But we ask everyone to look out for that with the possibility of that, making sure your sidewalks are clear,
right.
making sure your stoops. And probably the biggest thing is check on your neighbors. That we recommend knowing your neighbors. A lot of us have some elderly neighbors that might not have anyone else around. So what we ask is that you go out and get to know your neighbors. So you know if something's wrong. You know if this is unusual, if they haven't come out for 4 days to get the paper. And check on them. And your greatest asset is actually the citizens that we have. The fire department is a small portion. There are 140,000 citizens and 200 or so firefighters, almost 300. So if you look at that, you guys are, as citizens and as city employees as well, when you're out and about, to know your neighbors and know your area and to be able to try to report and let us know.
Right, something unusual happens. Okay, and remind people who do have smoke detectors, check those batteries twice a year.
Absolutely. Every time we change the clocks. Every time we change the clocks. I recommend to everyone else, you change the battery, then take those batteries and put them in your children's toys if you want. The batteries may still be good, but the question is, what is your life worth versus the cost of a battery? So
right, and as you said, you don't have to throw them away. You can put them in something
Absolutely.
that gets used more frequently and monitored more frequently.
Right. Your child's remote, if that stops working, that's okay. If the smoke alarm
Right.
stops working, that's a bigger
problem.
issue.
And you don't know when it stops working. I mean, that's the scary part.
Right. You'll hear the beep, neat, but a lot of people just kind of ignore it. Oh, it'll go away, and next thing you know, it doesn't work. So.
Okay. Thank you, Captain Anthony Chittum, for coming by today. I know I've learned a lot. Some things in my house probably aren't real safe, and I think probably the people watching have learned a lot too. So thank you for watching. I hope you will not just watch, but put some of these tips into practice, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure and can save lives and save property as well. Thank you.